brazen kidnapping attempt in broad daylight in Queens, New York. A suspect seen in surveillance video grabbing a 5-year-old boy off the street and forcing him into a car. But the boy's mother reaches through the open window and pulls him, scrambling to safety. Police are searching for the suspects who drove away, and there's no evidence they knew the family. Coronavirus cases on the rise in all 50 states. The CDC director calling it a pandemic of the unvaccinated. The rise fueled by the highly contagious Delta variant, as hospitals warn most COVID patients they're seeing are younger and sicker, and almost all are unvaccinated. Now, Los Angeles set to restore its indoor mask mandate this weekend. And new questions tonight about when younger children will be able to get the shot and what may happen when they return to school. Overseas, dramatic images of the devastating flooding in Germany. At least 110 people are dead and hundreds listed as missing. Towns and villages underwater as search and rescue operations are underway. ABC's Marcus Moore is in Germany tonight. New developments in the arrest of NFL star Richard Sherman. Surveillance images made public showing him trying to break down the door of his in-laws' home moments before his arrest. Tonight, the charges filed against Sherman and his public statement of apology. 25 years after the tragic explosion of TWA Flight 800 off the coast of Long Island, the plane's wreckage is now set to be destroyed after being used as a training tool for crash investigators for the past 2 decades. Tonight, a look at the lessons learned from that tragedy.
The families were very clear that they wanted something good to come from this, and they believe that training future investigators would be extremely helpful.
And inclusive beauty, this new site highlighting beauty industry brands created by people of color for people of all colors. Tonight, my conversation with the site's co-founder, looking to build up brands and inspire new entrepreneurs.
We really want to help build generational wealth and lessen that financial gap and do it through the lens of beauty, because beauty is universal and for everyone.
Good evening, I'm Juju Chang in for Lindsay Davis. Thanks for streaming with us. A pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's what CDC Director Rochelle Walensky today said. The country faces despite vaccines being widely available to all Americans. Coronavirus cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are all rising. All of it preventable if more Americans would take the shot, which has been proven to be highly effective at preventing serious illness and death. But with vaccination rates now at the lowest level in months, there is growing concern about the highly contagious Delta variant wreaking more havoc and whether it could contribute to breakthrough cases hitting people with infections even after they're vaccinated. And as the Delta variant spreads, renewed concerns about children under 12 who aren't eligible yet for vaccines and who will be heading back to schools in the coming weeks. So when will we finally be able to get the protection of the vaccine? ABC's Whit Johnson starts us off tonight.
Tonight, an alarming rise in COVID cases as vaccination rates plunge across the country, down nearly 85% since mid-April, prompting this stark warning from the director of the CDC.
This is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Our biggest concern is that we are going to continue to see preventable cases, hospitalizations, and sadly deaths.
The administration monitoring the highest transmission in 5 states, including Florida, which accounts for 1 in 5 of all cases in the U.S. And with the Delta variant now dominant, concern about breakthrough infection.
You never expect yourself to necessarily be in that category, but I became one of those unlucky breakthrough cases.
Travis Desjardins says he's fully vaccinated, but tested positive after traveling to Cape Cod for the 4th of July. Current data shows the vaccines remain highly effective at preventing hospitalization and death. But today, Dr. Fauci was asked how much those rare breakthrough cases were contributing to the current spread.
I think one can make a reasonable assumption that it would be less likely that vaccinated breakthrough person would transmit compared to an unvaccinated person.
The U.S. daily case average jumping 129% since mid-June. Today, California topping 4,600 new COVID cases, the most since February. Now, at least 11 counties reimposing indoor mask mandates or recommendations, even for the vaccinated, impacting more than half the state.
We're seeing a significant spike such that the numbers are about 7-fold.
And with some children returning to the classroom in just days, Arizona educator and parent Katie Nash wants the state to bring back its mask mandate in schools.
It just makes me very apprehensive about what potentially could happen when you have 30 plus kids in a classroom, all working together, sharing that same space, that same air.
Kids under 12 still not eligible for a vaccine, but Pfizer is planning to apply for emergency authorization in September or October. Regulators say they want to see extra assurances the vaccine is safe, possibly extending the time spent monitoring kids for any reactions. That could mean shots into arms by late this year or early 2022.
The notion that children can't be sick or become very sick with this virus is false. This is a disease which can be severe in children, and if we can prevent it safely, we should prevent it.
ABC's Whit Johnson joins me now. Whit, the FDA announcing they'll give priority review for full approval for the Pfizer vaccine. What's their timeline, and could this make a difference for those who've hesitated?
Juju, today the FDA granted that accelerated 6-month timeline for review. This could mean full approval for the Pfizer vaccine for those 16 and older by January 2022, possibly even sooner. Some think this might persuade businesses and schools to require vaccines and perhaps give some confidence to those who are still on the fence to go out and go ahead and get their shots. Juju.
Thanks, Whit Johnson. And for more, we're joined by Dr. Anish Jha, Dean of the Brown School of Public Health. Thanks for your time, Dr. Jha.
Thank you for having me here.
Well, as we heard, the head of the CDC is now calling this pandemic the pandemic of the unvaccinated. But we're also seeing those breakthrough infections among the vaccinated, like those pro athletes contracting the virus and the Yankees-Red Sox game being postponed last night. So how should those of us who are vaccinated remain on guard?
Yeah, because this infection is spreading so quickly and the Delta virus is so contagious, we are starting to see these breakthrough infections. I'm fully vaccinated. My strategy is mostly to spend time with other fully vaccinated people. If you're in large indoor gatherings, to wear a mask, but especially in communities where the infection numbers are rising quickly. The good news is that the breakthrough infections largely don't lead to people getting very sick. That's really helpful, but it is starting to happen.
You mentioned those counties where rates are increasing, including Southern California, which is now recommending masks again indoors writ large. Do you agree with that guidance, and do you think more places will follow suit?
Yeah, I think I do agree with the guidance. And the reason is because infection numbers are rising so quickly and there's still so many people who are unvaccinated. I think if you're in a place with high levels of vaccination and low numbers of infection, you don't need to be wearing a mask indoors if you're fully vaccinated. But in LA County, for instance, where infection numbers are rising, lots of people still not vaccinated, it makes more sense.
And yet we're also seeing larger and larger gatherings again, concerts, Broadway is reopening. Any concerns that we may be going back to pre-pandemic life too soon?
Well, obviously we all are anxious to get back to normal. And if we had more people vaccinated, we could do this much more safely. I am worried that as I see those venues open up, if there are a lot of unvaccinated people in those rooms, it's going to cause a real problem. And we're starting to see that. So I think we can get back pretty quickly if we got more people vaccinated. That's the challenge right now.
And Dr. Jha, we still don't know when kids under 12 can get vaccinated. And with the spread of that Delta variant you mentioned, there are new concerns about schools reopening in the fall. How do you think schools should respond, and what do you think that vaccine timeline will be for the younger ones?
Yeah, so the good news is we've learned a lot about keeping schools open, and I think we have more than enough scientific evidence that we can get all kids back to school safely this fall. The key is going to be making sure all the adults around them are vaccinated. If that happens, then and as long as the school also has some basic precautions like good ventilation, that kind of things, and I think can keep schools pretty safe. I suspect we're going to see kids be able to get vaccinated probably in the fall or winter. We just have to wait for the data.
And finally, we saw the Surgeon General's warning on the dangers of misinformation hurting the vaccine effort. As a public health expert, just how concerned are you that false information online could keep us from getting the country back under control?
Yeah, I am deeply concerned about this. Look, at this point, we have enough information, enough data, and all the tools to put this pandemic behind us. The reason it continues to plague us is so many people are bombarded with misinformation about vaccines, and that makes them hesitant and makes them concerned about getting vaccinated. We've got to do a much better job of reaching out to people, helping them understand the real information that's out there, and countering all this nonsense that some people are propagating as a way to try to, keep people from getting vaccinated. And that, by the way, keeps the pandemic going. And none of us want the pandemic to keep going. We want it to stop.
Absolutely, Dr. Jha. We're grateful for your science and for your truth always. Dr. Jha, Dean of the Brown School of Public Health. Thanks so much. And we turn now to catastrophic flooding across Western Europe, which has left over 100 dead and scores of people missing. Take a look at this video. Floodwaters have swallowed cars, homes, even entire villages. And this home lifted and dragged, knocking down everything in its path. One of the countries most intensely impacted, Germany. And that's where we find our Marcus Moore.
Tonight, the German army using tanks and armored personnel carriers, cutting through deep floodwaters in their desperate search for victims, and the hundreds still missing in the worst flooding Europe has seen in a century. Days of rain sweeping away cars, destroying entire towns, and cutting off villages. Helicopters rescuing the stranded, firefighters standing on top of their trucks reaching for trapped residents. Southwest of Cologne, a massive landslide taking out homes in the city of Blessem.
I want to give you a sense of how strong that current was when it came through Euskirchen here. You can see this pole left leaning, the high water picking up all sorts of debris, including this car. It's been left destroyed. And look at the windshield, smashed. The mirrors have also been knocked off. And right now, it's resting against this tree. Just an absolute mess here.
In Zinzig, 12 people died at an assisted living facility for the disabled. And in the devastated town of Bliesheim, we met American Vincent Thievenin. He says the water was chest high at one point.
Count yourself lucky if you can get out of here alive. If you compare it to Hurricane Katrina, I mean, everybody here has lost everything.
The dramatic rescues and scenes of devastation playing out across Western Europe. In Belgium, this barge breaking free and sinking in the floodwaters. Rescuers using sledgehammers to break through a wall and carry an elderly woman to safety. At least 20 are dead just in Belgium. The numbers expected to rise across the storm zone.
And Marcus joins us now. Marcus, some unbelievable images coming out of Germany. What's the latest on the amount of missing people?
Well, Juju, the numbers are actually staggering. There are reports that 1,300 people are unaccounted for. And at the same time, there are more than 100,000 people without power right now, and phone services are down. And in this part of the country, the cell phone signal is often spotty. So the hope tonight, Juju, is that many of the people who are unaccounted for are actually alive and well. They just haven't been able to call out, or their relatives can't call them. But there is, at the same time, real concern that as the water continues to recede here, searchers will find more bodies. Juju.
Marcus, I know you came off vacation to do this heroic coverage. Good for you. Thanks. And we turn now to the alleged plot to blow up the Democrats' party headquarters in Sacramento, California. Prosecutors have indicted 2 men tonight. They say the suspects were inspired by the unfounded belief that the 2020 election was stolen from former President Trump. Prosecutors also say a search of their homes found a stash of weapons, including pipe bombs and a white privilege card. ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has the story.
Tonight, the Justice Department indicting 2 men on charges they were plotting to blow up California Democratic headquarters. Their alleged motive, former President Donald Trump's big lie.
That was a rigged election, but we're still fighting it, and you'll see what's going to happen.
The 2 men, Ian Rogers and Jared Copeland, allegedly believed Trump had won the 2020 election. The indictment says text messages from Rogers' phone reveal his intent to attack Democrats and places associated with Democrats in an effort to ensure that Trump remained in office. On January 11th, Rogers allegedly texting, "I want to blow up a Democrat building bad." Copeland allegedly responding, "I agree, plan attack." Investigators say Rogers had this, a white privilege card. On it, Trump's everything, with the number 45 repeated. References, they say, to the former president. Prosecutors insist it was not just talk, that a January raid on Rogers' home and business uncovered 5 pipe bombs and a huge cache of nearly 50 weapons, including handguns, rifles, and a machine gun. and they were allegedly ready to fight alongside the former president. Rogers texting, "I hope 45 goes to war. If he doesn't, I will."
And Pierre Thomas joins us now from D.C. Pierre, what can you tell us about this unusual case, and is there still a danger?
Well, the key here is that federal prosecutors say these men were motivated by the big lie. They thought that Trump won the election, so prosecutors are saying it motivated them to plan a plot to blow up Democratic headquarters in California, and they say the men remain a threat.
Our thanks to you, Pierre. We know you'll stay on top of it. And a federal judge in Texas has ruled that the DACA program is illegal. It's a blow to President Obama's 2012 executive order that shielded young people who had been brought to this country illegally as children from deportation. Texas, joined by 8 other states, argued the Obama administration overextended its authority in creating the program. In a tweet, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus tonight saying it was more important than ever for Congress to pass permanent protections and a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers. And now to Capitol Hill, where lawmakers are rushing to make progress on 2 major pieces of legislation ahead of a procedural vote next week. A bipartisan group of senators is still working out the details of an infrastructure deal, while Democrats are pushing ahead with a separate, larger spending plan that could be passed without Republican votes. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze has the latest.
The clock is ticking for lawmakers to iron out details of the bipartisan infrastructure plan and a separate, massive Democrats-only spending package. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has now set a deadline next week for a crucial test vote on the bipartisan deal.
There is no reason why we can't start voting next Wednesday, and that's what we're going to do.
Negotiators of the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal are still scrambling to put their agreement into writing and to show how they'd fund the almost $600 billion in new spending. One key way to pay for the plan, increasing IRS tax enforcement, appears to be on the chopping block, as senators seek to secure the 60 votes needed for the bill to advance.
It's got to be done in a way that garners enough bipartisan support to get it done.
At the same time, Democrats are trying to work out how to pay for their $3.5 trillion so-called human infrastructure plan, with priorities on health care, education, and climate change. Democrats are racing to move forward with the budget reconciliation process that would allow the plan to pass without any Republican votes.
Americans cannot afford another socialist borrowing, taxing, and spending spree that will kill jobs and raise costs for working families.
Despite the moving parts and short timeline, President Biden says he's supremely confident both plans will pass.
And I've watched and listened in the press, declared my initiative dead at least 10 times so far. I don't think it's dead. I think it's still alive.
Our thanks to Elizabeth Schulze. For more on that massive infrastructure plan, we're joined by Democratic Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota. Thanks for your time, Senator.
Thank you, Juju. It's great to be with you.
Well, as Elizabeth reports, President Biden is confident that both these infrastructure plans will pass. Do you share that optimism?
I am optimistic. I think that the bipartisan bill is a strong bill. It accomplishes many of the things that we need to accomplish, but it doesn't accomplish all that we need. And that's why I'm so excited about the big budget bill that it looks like we're going to pass with Democrat-only votes. That is really a bill that puts the government to work for middle-class Americans in a way that we haven't seen in over a generation. And we have got to get both of them done together.
We've heard from the progressive wing of your party, from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at a virtual town hall Thursday night. She was threatening to vote down the bipartisan infrastructure package in the House unless the Senate passes the separate and much larger package using the fast-track budget process. Let's listen.
House progressives are standing up. We will tank the bipartisan infrastructure bill unless we also pass the reconciliation bill.
Do you think this is the right approach, Senator, or do you think it might backfire?
Well, I think what she is saying is what so many of us are saying, basically, which is that these two bills are inextricably linked. They must go together. That's what I think. That's what Senator Schumer thinks, and I think the vast majority of the Democrats in my caucus, if not everybody, and it's what Speaker Pelosi thinks. These two things have to go together. We have to work out the timing of them, and I believe that at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. And the reason that's so important is, for example, in the bipartisan bill, we make important steps towards providing electric charging stations to expand access to people with electric vehicles. But in the budget bill, the reconciliation bill that we're going to pass, that's where we put in the clean electricity standard, which is our way of cleaning up the electric grid to get it to net zero carbon emissions as soon as possible. So you can see how those two things have to go together.
And I know you've been a huge advocate for the clean electricity standard. Tell us why it's such a top priority for you.
Well, the clean electricity standard is a practical and very progressive way to get us to net zero carbon emissions in the electric sector as soon as possible. It says that utilities will, through an investment-based strategy, utilities will add clean energy until we get to net zero. And the government, federal government, will be there to help them do that. And also, I hope, have penalties if they don't get there. What's so great about this is we can do it in a way that keeps utility rates stable and also fuels the kind of innovation in clean electricity and clean energy broadly that we need. You know, this transition is going to happen, and I think the only question is whether the United States leads or follows, and I want us to lead, and this is the path for making that a reality.
And yet you still have to hold your coalition, and I know that Democratic Senator Joe Manchin holds the key there, and he's said he's concerned about inflation, which we know is rising. Are you worried that spending trillions of dollars might lead to higher inflation?
Well, just a couple of days ago, I had a chance to speak with Fed Chair Jay Powell, and I won't quote him, but what I took away from our conversation is that we are seeing some short-term inflation because the economy is getting back into business after what has been one of the most catastrophic public health and economic emergencies that I think our country has ever lived through. So, of course, we always have to be concerned about inflation, but what I see is the economy adapting and adjusting to what's been this sort of seismic event. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is we put the federal government to work for middle-class Americans by addressing climate change, by expanding access to childcare, by doing what will be the largest middle-class tax cut, I think, in the history of this country. That all of that is included in the Democrats' budget plan, reconciliation plan.
Now, on the other side of the aisle, some Republican leaders are demanding a price tag or score on these plans. Is that necessary, and how confident are you that these spending packages will be fully paid?
Well, part of the way that we do things in Washington, I think rightly so, is we have to look at an impartial estimate of how much things will cost. And so that's important. I mean, I have to point out, however, that when the Republican Congress, before I was in Washington, passed a massive tax cut that mostly benefited big corporations and wealthy Americans, they didn't have to pay for that tax cut. And of course, it ended up not being much of a benefit at all to just regular Americans. So all of this stuff is going to get worked out. This is the legislative process. It's a lot of give and take, a lot of back and forth. And at the end of the day, I feel confident that we're going to be able to do something that is really going to be seen and felt by Minnesotans and by Americans.
Well, Senator Tina Smith, we thank you for your leadership and for your time tonight. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Well, there are more hurdles for Team USA after a player is taken off the men's basketball roster because of COVID. All of this as concerns over Japan's growing case count could potentially cause the Olympics to become a super spreader event. ABC's James Longman is in Tokyo.
Tonight, more bad news for US men's basketball. Cleveland Cavaliers' Kevin Love withdrawing with a calf injury. That comes just after Bradley Beal from the Washington Wizards was pulled from the squad over COVID concerns. He's been placed under health and safety protocols, along with another player, Jeremy Grant of the Detroit Pistons. It's not clear if Grant will go to Tokyo, but the team is now finalising the choices of at least 2 replacement players for the Games. And now the first Olympic visitor hospitalised for COVID. Local media reporting an official with the Nigerian team tested positive on arrival in Tokyo Thursday. The person, who's said to be in their 60s, had only light symptoms, but was admitted because of their age and pre-existing conditions. Tokyo in a state of emergency, seeing the highest COVID levels in 6 months.
This is the centerpiece of the Tokyo Games, a $1.5 billion stadium. But take a look at all the security around it. This is about as close as most Japanese are going to get to their own Olympic Games.
Protests against the Games, although small, are growing.
I think a lot of us in Japan are still in disbelief that it's actually happening in about a week.
And James Longman joins us now. James, konnichiwa. Give us some insight of the day-by-day challenges athletes are facing heading into these games with obviously COVID looming over everything.
Yeah, I think the stress of these restrictions, Juju, is really having an impact on the athletes, and we've already seen that. Elizabeth Cambridge, she's an Australian basketball player, one of their best. She actually plays in the WNBA for the Las Vegas Aces. She's withdrawn from the Olympics now, citing the stress of having to live in this bubble. She says she's been getting panic attacks, and she just doesn't want to come to Tokyo to have to go through it. And I can tell you, being here, it is pretty stressful. I mean, you've got to have tests in my case, every 3 days. We have apps on our phones which track our movement all the time. I think for some of these athletes, the thought of that alongside competing at the highest level must be very difficult. And also, I think thinking about how these restrictions are going to impact the actual events and the differences between individual and team events especially. I mean, if you think about it, if you're like an archer or something, or an equestrian perhaps, if you go down with COVID, if you're contact traced, there might be a reserve who can come in and take your place. That's allowed in the IOC rules. But the team events, what if, you know, a fly half and a rugby team, for instance, gets taken down with COVID? There are not endless numbers of fly halves that can come and take that person's place. So I think for the team events especially, they're worried about how they could be impacted by these restrictions. These Olympics are going to be really, really different, Juju.
Absolutely. So much food for thought. Thanks, James. We're so happy to see you at the Tokyo Tower. Thanks for that. And when we come back, our inside look at the lessons learned from the tragic crash of TWA Flight 800. It's been 25 years, and the plane's wreckage has been used as a teaching tool for a generation of flight crash investigators. And the new video showing the moments NFL star Richard Sherman tried to break down the door in his in-laws' home moments before his arrest. Tonight, the new charges he faces and his apology. And after months on lockdown, the Eiffel Tower in Paris is once again open to tourists, including vaccinated Americans who can return to Europe this summer. Our Maggie Rulli gives us a first look at the iconic landmark's reopening.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
When I started my journey, I wanted to teach people there is no such thing as a bad dog.
From the leader of the pack.
She won't listen to me.
Today's a new day. Claim your space.
Comes a serene new series.
She has forgotten how to be a dog. No more excuses. It's now or never.
Discover tranquility through training.
I need you to be calm and confident.
It's amazing.
You did good.
Cesar Millan, Better Human, Better Dog. New series Friday, July 30th at 9 on National Geographic.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
The chilling true crime story of an 85 Chicago Bears legend and the murder of his pregnant girlfriend. Stunning interviews. 2020 tonight on ABC. Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on the tough questions with straightforward reporting. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
And welcome back. We head now to Utah, where a massive train derailment pulled nearly 100 cars off the tracks in a remote part of the state. Authorities say 3 workers were injured when the train ran into rising floodwaters, covering the rails. Emergency workers arrived a few hours later, delayed by that weather. It's been 25 years since TWA Flight 800 tragically exploded off the coast of Long Island, killing everyone on board. But most people don't know that its wreckage was pieced back together and used as a training tool for crash investigators for the past 2 decades. But that now comes to an end this month. ABC News transportation correspondent Gio Benitez explains why the plane will now be destroyed for good.
TWA Flight 800 grabbed the world's attention and hearts.
There has been a terrible air disaster off the coast of Long Island in New York.
July 1996, the 747 took off from New York's JFK Airport, headed for Paris. 12 minutes later, the jumbo jet exploding, crashing off the coast of Long Island. Its burnt debris scattered for miles under the sea. The nose of the plane breaking off, falling into the sea. All 230 people on board instantly killed. Devastated family members left questioning what caused the accident.
We do not yet know what caused Flight 800 to crash, whether it was mechanical failure or sabotage. But we will find out.
The investigation quickly becoming the most complicated and expensive in aviation history, lasting more than 4 years and costing $40 million. Officials spent months searching the water for debris, using divers and sonar to locate the plane, then putting it back together piece by piece to find out what happened to the doomed flight. Frank Hildrup was on the scene during the investigation.
It was necessary for us to see things, to see the damage that existed, to see the damage that didn't exist.
Government officials initially pointing to terrorism, but NTSB investigators later discovering that an explosion in the plane's center wing fuel tank led to the crash. A short circuit and damaged wiring likely the cause of that explosion. The investigation and its findings changing how manufacturers design and build airplanes today and preventing future tragedy.
The safety actions that came out of this that were hugely important on fuel tank flammability, wiring issues, those were big, meaty issues that affected a large portion of the fleet.
And for more than 2 decades, the remains of TWA 800 have been housed in a hangar just outside D.C., serving as an aviation accident training center for thousands of people.
The families were very clear that they wanted something good to come from this, and they believed that training future investigators would be extremely helpful.
Now, as the lease ends in this warehouse and technology improves, the wreckage is set to be destroyed later this year. The NTSB hoping to digitally scan the plane for future trainings around the world.
For me personally, as somebody who worked on this, it really represents that teamwork and a collaborative effort. I may not be able to see the actual wreckage anymore. I think it's going to open up different ways of learning for people as part of our training aspect, for our own investigators. We're losing something, but we're gaining something too. That's the way I look at it.
The NTSB also gave families the opportunity to visit that wreckage anytime they wanted. So now that chapter closes, but not lost is the very real reminder that this tragedy changed aviation safety. Juju?
Gio Benitez, thanks. Still ahead here on Prime, the director of the new Anthony Bourdain documentary now under fire after revealing he used AI technology to recreate the late chef's voice for the film. And the new report breaking down the high health care costs of gun violence and how it hits low-income communities the hardest. We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. After COVID knocked one player off the U.S. men's basketball team, the NBA's JaVale McGee will now join the Olympic team, something that runs in the family.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute. Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was going to say.
Oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Hours, Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live. Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
We turn now to the epidemic of gun violence in America. A new report by the Government Accountability Office looked at the health care costs of treating firearm injuries based on 2016-2017 data. And here's what they found by the numbers. More than $1 billion a year. That's the initial health care hospital costs for treating gun violence injuries, and public programs like Medicaid pay for the bulk of it. Physician costs that aren't captured in this data could add another 20% to that total, the report found. And gun violence accounts for roughly 30,000 hospital stays and 50,000 emergency room visits in the U.S. every year. And up to 16% of firearm injury survivors are readmitted to the hospital at least once, costing an additional $8,000 to $11,000 per patient. And finally, the report found that more than 50% of firearm injury patients live in zip codes with an annual median household income below $44,000 a year, showing the high toll gun violence has on lower income communities. And we still have much more ahead here on Prime. NFL star Richard Sherman appears in court after his arrest this week, and his new statement expressing remorse and vowing to get help. We'll have the latest. The new website shining a spotlight on inclusive beauty brands made by people of color. My conversation with the site's co-founder. And Paris reopens its doors from the pandemic, from the Eiffel Tower to Versailles to that incredible food. Maggie Rulli gives us a look at the city of love. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was going to say.
Oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, the hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
The Delta variant is gripping the nation, hitting unvaccinated Americans especially hard. President Biden on the South Lawn before leaving for Camp David was asked about the rise in coronavirus cases, up 70% in the U.S. this past week. He said it's not just the Delta variant, but also misinformation on social media about the vaccines fueling the rise.
I mean, it really, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
There is a clear message that is coming through. This is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
In Central Europe, rescues continue in parts of Germany and Belgium after raging floodwaters swept through towns. More than 125 people confirmed dead and hundreds of people still missing. Rescuers scrambling to reach remote areas cut off by crumbled infrastructure. The floods overlapping with drought and severe heat in the region. Extreme weather events scientists say are becoming more common because of climate change.
Ford is issuing 3 recalls for more than 800,000 vehicles. The largest recall involves the 2013 to 2017 Ford Explorer because of an issue that could cause a fractured rear suspension affecting steering. Ford is also recalling thousands of its F-350 Super Duty vehicles over a rear axle housing problem, and some Lincoln Aviators because of a battery problem which could cause fire.
There's no happy ending.
3 years after his death, Anthony Bourdain helps tell his own story in his own words in the new documentary Roadrunner.
I said earlier that I was going to tell you the truth. This is part of it.
Parts of the film are narrated in Bourdain's voice, created by stitching together audio recordings from throughout his career as a writer and host of the TV shows No Reservations and Parts Unknown. But the director of the documentary, Morgan Neville, revealed it's not all Bourdain's voice. Instead, he used artificial intelligence software to replicate Bourdain's voice on a few quotes in the film, attributed to Bourdain that Bourdain may have never actually spoken out loud. Like this one, a quote from an email Bourdain wrote to a friend before his death by suicide. Listen closely.
You were successful, and I'm successful, and I'm wondering, are you happy?
Neville says he got permission from Bourdain's widow and literary executor to use AI.
The Biden administration reversing a Trump-era regulation relaxing flow rate of showerheads. The former president's showerhead rule was approved after Trump complained that he was not getting wet enough during showers. Well, the Energy Department will now go back to standards set in 2013, which most showerheads still comply with and are designed to conserve water and energy.
Today in Los Angeles, it's 85 degrees. Say my name. Woo-hoo.
Alexa amping up her personality game.
So as of now, users of Amazon's virtual assistant can choose to have their devices speak in the voices of Shaquille O'Neal and Melissa McCarthy, and the two join Samuel L. Jackson as alternative voice options.
Hey, remember when you said to set that alarm for you? This is the alarm going off. So, you've been alarmed.
Ask me for the weather, got the forecast on lock. And if you need a timer, I set the shot clock. Workouts and music, sports scores and plays. I'm like a skyscraper, got stories for days. I can switch on the lights like they're so enchanted. Recipe for shack and cheese, wish granted.
So Shaq says it took him about 60 hours in a custom recording studio built in his own house by Amazon to program the device.
He said it was like reading out of a dictionary trying to get this set up, calling it the most difficult thing that he's ever done, and he's on TV every single day.
And now to the new video of NFL star Richard Sherman. Authorities say he was trying to break down the door of his in-laws' home moments before his arrest. And late today, Sherman appeared in court facing multiple charges, and we hear from him directly in a new statement. ABC's Kana Whitworth brings us the details.
Yeah. Former Super Bowl champion Richard Sherman appearing in court today, holding hands with his wife.
Enter pleas of not guilty to all of the charges.
Pleading not guilty to 5 misdemeanor charges after an early morning altercation at his in-laws' Seattle area home earlier this week. This surveillance video obtained by Como News appearing to show Sherman allegedly trying to break into his in-laws' home. Prosecutors say his father-in-law was so afraid he had a handgun at the ready and sprayed Sherman with bear mace. Earlier that night, Sherman's wife calling 911, telling dispatchers her husband was drunk and belligerent and was threatening to kill himself.
I need officers to my house now.
According to law enforcement, Sherman drove away, crashing his car before ending up at his in-laws' door. The charges against the 33-year-old free agent ranging from domestic violence, driving under the influence, to second-degree criminal trespassing and resisting arrest. Sherman, a 5-time Pro Bowl cornerback, breaking his silence on social media, writing in part, "I'm deeply remorseful for my actions on Tuesday night. I behaved in a manner I'm not proud of. The importance of mental and emotional health is extremely real, and I vow to get the help I need."
And Kana joins us now. Kana, what have we heard from both Sherman's wife and his attorney?
So, Juju, his wife is saying that she is also committed to helping him get the support and the care that he needs to get better. His lawyer says that he is currently investigating all the charges against Richard Sherman, adding, Juju, that he looks forward to vigorously defending him in court.
Well, we appreciate that update. Thanks, Kana Whitworth. Sadly, it's kind of a tale as old as time. Girl meets boy, girl likes boy, then girl finds out boy is dating another girl and another girl. Lara Spencer has the story of 3 girls united by who they thought was their boyfriend.
Meet Abby, Becca, and Morgan, 3 women who until recently never knew each other. But then 7 months ago, they all learned that the guy they were dating was the guy the other was dating. And not just them, 6 timing them, dating 6 different women all at the same time.
I met him in 2018 while he was dating Morgan. And we started talking and dating in the summer of 2020.
So they sent me a text and they were like, hey, we need to know about your relationship with this guy. They were basically like, yeah, like we're both dating him too. And that was like such a weird moment. Like he had just left my house.
So I opened the front door. He's standing there holding a bouquet of flowers. He asked me how my day was. And I say, yeah, I actually made some new friends today. Flip it. And he sees them on my phone. And his face just priceless.
But instead of getting mad at each other, they dumped the dude and joined forces. Moving on, literally. They renovated a 30-year-old school bus and started traveling around the country.
We started in Boise, Idaho. We traveled east. We went through the Grand Tetons, which was so much fun. And then we went through Jackson, through Yellowstone. We were just in Bozeman, Montana, and now we're back near Yellowstone.
These three soul sisters creating a bond stronger than any man can break.
I just learned to just take everything head on and like take opportunities and really keep going no matter how hard it is.
And their advice for other women who may be going through heartbreak?
Don't ignore red flags.
Surround yourself with people that lift you up, like, and don't tear you down. I think there's a lot of tearing down, and it sucks.
Living well is the best revenge. Our thanks to Lara for that. There's a new site setting a new tone for inclusivity in the beauty industry. 13 Loon is highlighting brands created by people of color, designed for people of all colors, proving that beauty comes in many shades. I got to catch up with their co-founder.
Nikio Grieco knows beauty.
We focus on body care, hair care, and skin care and makeup.
She launched a skincare line inspired by her Kenyan family traditions.
I felt that the continent of Africa, as a first-generation American, was very underrepresented in premium beauty.
And you were inspired by your grandmother's coffee scrub.
She was a coffee farmer in Kenya, and so she would take me on the farm. We would pick coffee beans, we would crush them, we would add oils, so we would use that to exfoliate our skin.
It took 20 years of hard work and fortitude for Nikio Beauty to land on the shelves at Target.
And that's when I really experienced a true dream realized.
But it wasn't easy getting there. One report found Black female entrepreneurs got less than 1% of venture capital investments in 2018.
I didn't really even recognize the barriers that I faced. I sort of assumed that it's supposed to be this hard.
Inspired by the racial awakening during the pandemic, Grieco launched 13 Loon, a website grounded in global and cultural traditions, focusing on beauty inclusivity.
We have brands from Africa, from Southeast Asia, from China, from the Dominican Republic. But they, are products that have to work on people of all colors, hair textures, skin types, and really tell a founder story.
Founders like Lulu Cordero, whose Dominican heritage inspired Bamba curls.
Her scalp is going to look amazing.
I come from a community that is traditionally underrepresented, and thanks to 13 Loon, we're able to shine a light on our community and show the world why curls, kinks, and melanin are bomba.
We really want to help build generational wealth and lessen that financial gap and do it through the lens of beauty, because beauty is universal and for everyone.
Indeed, universal. And still ahead on Prime, ABC's Maggie Rulli takes a tour of Paris as the city looks to reopen its doors to American tourists after a long pandemic lockdown. The sights and sounds of the City of Love when we come back.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart that he did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back. We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
And welcome back. We're tracking several international headlines at this hour. A Reuters photojournalist following the Afghanistan National Army was killed during a clash in the city of Kandahar. The Pulitzer Prize winner, Dinesh Siddiqui, was the chief photographer based in India, where he covered the COVID-19 pandemic. He had worked for Reuters since 2010 and was just 38 years old. Today, the Biden administration is warning American companies about the increased risk of doing business in Hong Kong, a fall from grace for the international city. A business advisory released by the State Department points to the national security law passed there last year as changing the political landscape in that city. A State Department spokeswoman says Wednesday, risks that were formerly limited to mainland China are now increasingly a concern in Hong Kong. And while many countries are still battling the pandemic, Canada's Prime Minister says fully vaccinated Americans may be able to travel there as soon as August, and fully vaccinated travelers from any country would be able to visit in September, assuming that public health conditions and vaccination rates there continue to improve. Well, much of Europe is also reopening to American travelers this summer. So tonight, we head to Paris and take a look at what tourists can expect as the city opens its doors, including at the iconic Eiffel Tower. ABC's Maggie Rulli has more.
That sound means Paris is back.
France's borders now open to anyone from America who's fully vaccinated or has a recent negative PCR test. And the city is ready to welcome you back.
Nothing screams I'm in Paris more than turning a corner and then boom, there's the Eiffel Tower. And she's looking better than ever. For the first time in her 130-year history, the Eiffel Tower is going through its largest renovation ever, including a brand new paint job that officials say will be done soon.
People are lining up to be the very first back up on the Eiffel Tower.
As Americans, it is kind of what we always see in France.
And for him, it would be amazing because
I've never seen it before, and it's my first time in France.
Shut down for 9 months during France's second wave, the longest closure since World War II. Finally, the symbol of Paris is once again open for business.
The Eiffel Tower reopening, it's like life is back again.
Sophie Favreau, a tour guide here in Paris, says during lockdown, she went from giving 3 tours a day to 3 in the last year and a half.
It was like a crash, total crash. I just lost my activity from one day to another.
But with the Eiffel Tower back open, she's hoping the tourists follow. Many Americans are already booking their flights. Authorities say they're now ready to open up and still keep people safe, filling elevators at only 50% capacity, making masks mandatory, and limiting it to 10,000 people a day, half their pre-pandemic numbers. And for the first time since before the pandemic, every floor of the 1,063-foot tall tower is open to the public. Now, day or night.
This is why people love the Eiffel Tower.
And it's not just the Eiffel Tower reopening. All of Paris is back in business with a few safety precautions.
Wow. Look at that. That's amazing.
Starting next week, anyone, including tourists, will have to have a health pass showing you're fully vaccinated or have a recent negative PCR test. And starting in August, restaurants and shops will also require the pass. Paris seems to be determined to stay safe without sacrificing the croissants. Because, of course, Paris wouldn't be Paris without French food.
Bonjour, monsieur.
David Leibowitz, an American chef and author who now lives in France, shows us that the Parisian food scene we see in the movies has not been destroyed by the pandemic.
Yeah.
In Paris, food and friends go together like, well, wine and cheese.
France is really a lot about personal connections.
We learn and taste how in France, ingredients are everything.
Each tomato has a story.
Each tomato has a story.
Well, the tomatoes are beautiful.
I know, look at those. Ordering for the first time in a French restaurant may seem intimidating.
There's a myth that French people don't like Americans, especially Parisians, and I've actually never had a bad experience.
They bring a kind of spirit of liberty that we love. They have an open-minded that we love. It's always a pleasure for us to try to treat them or to make sure that they can enjoy and discover some new products, some new dishes, a bit of history. That's what we like.
He says lockdown crushed more than just his restaurant.
You can feel it, all the love we put in our plates. When you do takeaway, it is absolutely not the same vibration that when you see the chef cooking for you.
But now the kitchen is humming. And yes, cafes are back. And there's a table waiting.
Oh, no.
Maggie Rulli, ABC News, Paris.
Food is love. Thanks, Maggie Rulli. And before we go tonight, the image of the day, a photo that's sure to become an instant meme. The Dalton County Fire Department in Georgia posting this picture of a raccoon after firefighters were called to entice this little guy out of a house. He was clearly embarrassed that he got stuck in such a mess. The Dalton Fire Department saying the bashful raccoon was safely released back into the wilds. Looks like he has a headache, too. That's our show for this hour. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks for streaming with us.